Hey, it's Quadix here. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like, comment, Q, and subscribe. Check out my Discord and my Instagram. Both links will be in the description. If you want this series to be a main series and be uploaded daily, get this to 500 likes. If not, I'll upload it whenever I feel like it. Let's get into the video.
Roll the intro.
And today thinking myself
Naruto sighed in mild irritation as he spun his kunai in his fingers almost lazily. Sitting on his bed in the hotel room he and Jiraiya had rented for the night. This was only supposed to be a small stop in town until Jiraiya had spotted a pretty young lady who had winked at him. Almost immediately, Jiraiya had waved him off to find a hotel room for the night while he gathered some information. Naruto snorted. He knew damn well Jiraiya was following after the woman from earlier like a lovesick puppy, and he thought that this was an urgent mission. Still, there was something that Naruto had noticed when the woman had winked at Jiraiya. First off, Jiraiya was not even that good looking. He was just an old man in his 50s. No sane young woman would so much as even look at his direction that the way the woman from earlier did. Second, the woman was pretty. Pretty as in above average pretty. She wore a strapless dress that was designed to show off her well-endowed chest and long legs, along with high heels. She could have gotten any man, but she went straight for Jiraiya. She did not even glance at the other men that were standing in the lobby with them. That was another thing that rang alarm bells in his mind. Also, it looked as if that woman was dressed to entice or seduce someone, unless she was heading out on a date, that too alone. While why would a woman dress up to entice Jiraiya? Also, Jiraiya had been correct in the regard that he would attract female attention. As soon as they had entered the town, whenever they would pass by a girl close to his age, she would blush and giggle. It was slightly confusing and scary, to be honest. One girl was brave enough to even come to him and ask if he wanted to spend some time with her and her friends. He had barely kept from freaking out, and Jiraiya had just walked off somewhere, leaving him alone to deal with the girl. Thankfully, Naruto was able to gently let her down by using the classic excuse. He was here to train with his master, and the time for training was drawing to a close. The girl had been visibly disappointed, but had understood. Surprising him, she had whispered an address in his ear, telling that if he was free, he was allowed to come over there, and she had kissed him on the cheek before leaving. Who the hell kisses a random stranger on the cheeks anyways? Before Naruto could think up on this any further, the knock of a door snapped him out of his thoughts. His eyes narrowed as he sensed two large chakra signatures outside his door. One, astoundingly enough, a bit bigger than his own. The other one he sensed was shockingly similar to his teammate, Sasuke. There was no way he was going to answer the doorbell. His danger sense was ringing bells in his head. He soundlessly created a shadow clone. He began to move towards the door. His footsteps were loud enough for Naruto to cover his own as he flipped out of the window. He knew that whoever was outside wouldn't be fooled by it, but it would have to do. He doubted that they were here just to say hello. He would have flashed over to where Jiraiya was, but that idea had a risk. First of all, if he suddenly flashed in the middle of a crowd and disappeared with a person, it would cause panic in the crowd. Yeah, not happening. Looks like I would have to give him a noticeable signal to arrive here, Naruto thought as he flipped up to the roof and headed to the window of the end of the corridor. Naruto opened the door and found himself looking up into a pair of fully matured Sharingan. His first thought was Sasuke, but then his thought process kicked in. First, this guy was taller than him, and Sasuke was 4 inches shorter than him. Second, his hairstyle was different, and he had troughs under his eyes. That's a weird way of saying the thing. I don't know how to describe. Well, I guess it's not a weird way to say it. Third, he wore a Konoha headband which was slashed, indicating he was a missing nin. Yup, he was facing Uchiha Itachi. Crap, I never thought I would have to meet Itachi of all people, the clone thought as he delivered his eyes from the Sharingan to Itachi's forehead. He carefully kept his face blank of any emotion. To think that this boy contains the QB, came a voice from beside Itachi as a very distinct figure came into view. This man was taller than Jiraiya, and he had very obvious blue skin and shark-like features, such as facial markings that resembled like fish gills. He was also carrying a very large bandaged blade. His clothing matched Itachi's, a long black cloak with red clouds on it. He was also wearing a slashed headband, making him a missing nin. Unless I'm mistaken, which is very low chance, this guy is a former member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist. And what's the deal with this chakra? It's almost as big as Prime's, maybe even a bit bigger. And they know about Kurama, so I can guess they are here for him? Naruto-kun, you're coming with us, Itachi said in a monotone voice as he gazed at his target. He was not expecting Naruto to look like this at all. No, he wasn't talking about how he was gazing at a literal carbon copy of the Yondaime. He was talking about Naruto's stature. He was expecting a genin, a 12 to 13-year-old boy. Naruto looked like he was almost 15 and not a genin at all. Instead, Naruto's posture did not portray any fear or anxiety one might have when facing an errant criminal. He was smart, for he immediately averted his eyes to his forehead. The posture was straight and very carefully guarded. Itachi might have thought he was relaxed, even if not for the barely noticeable tensing of shoulder and the subsequent clenching of fist. Naruto stared at Itachi. Why? Let's go outside the room, Itachi opted to say. He watched in silent approval as Naruto carefully stepped out of the room, keeping him and Kisame in his sights. He came to stand in front of them, keeping his feet slightly apart and hands at his sides. Naruto had no intention of running, for Prime should be here any moment now. His job was only to distract, so he began talking. Why do I have the honor of meeting Uchiha Itachi, and a former member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist? If Itachi was shocked, he didn't show it, because he was damn good at hiding his emotion. People found blank walls easier to read instead of him. Kisame, however, grinned. A smart one, aren't you? Naruto just folded his hands across his chest and gave the shark man a dry look. I don't need to be smart in order to label you as one of the Seven Swordmen. Your giant sword gives it away, not to mention the slashed headband. Kisame turned to Itachi. Itachi-san, it would be a bother to see if this kid keeps moving around. Perhaps I should chop off his legs. Naruto didn't even look the least disturbed at the threat. In fact, I dare you to try. Kisame chuckled and slowly moved forward, clenching the handle of his sword. Your bravado is amusing. You must be a fool if you think you can stand and win against me. Itachi... my Kisame voice is bad. I know how he stands, I just can't do it, so I'm not gonna try it. Itachi watched as Kisame closed onto Naruto. Something was wrong here, he thought. Naruto looked like he won't be making a move anytime soon. He was relaxed. Too relaxed. Move, Kisame! The command was spoken softly, but it still carried power and urgency. Kisame heard it and was barely able to move in time, for Naruto glowed and exploded with a bang, blasting the walls and any area near him. Meanwhile, Naruto heard the bang and smirked from his position outside the window of the corridor. The explosion was something he hadn't taken into account, but it wasn't a bad thing either. The clone's job was only to distract the newcomers, but this worked as well. A good thing the entire floor was empty. He would go through the memories later. Itachi and Kisame stared at the spot where the clone used to be. Exploding Kagebunshin, Itachi whispered in the slightest wonder. It looked like Naruto was smarter than he previously thought, and very perceptive too. He had known the danger of them and had a shadow clone answer in his place. They had been talking to a shadow clone all this time. Kisame gave a grunt of irritation as he looked at his slightly burnt hand. It had been way too close. Looks like the Jinchuriki is going to be more trouble than we thought, he muttered as he healed the burn with his chakra. I can't do a raspy voice. Itachi, on the other hand, was thinking of what this could mean. Naruto was obviously not here. He was out and he had left the shadow clone in his place to keep guard. That or Naruto had somehow known they were here and had gone to call Jiraiya, but they both jumped a bit sideways, letting the bolt of red lightning pass in between them and collapse a wall on the end of the corridor to splinters. Itachi and Kisame turned their heads to see the real Naruto standing behind them, right hand extended and the other hand holding a kunai. Naruto smirked at the looks on their faces, more like the look on Kisame's face. Itachi was as blank as empty paper. Kisame was baring his sharp teeth in annoyance. I can't believe you fell for that. Apparently Kisame did not like the mocking at all. So 1 second he was why did I do Naruto's voice like that? I didn't know it was Naruto. So 1 second he was standing beside Itachi, the other he was right in Naruto's personal space, sword ready to cut him. The power behind the strike was enough to shatter a piece of the wall behind him, and would have sliced Naruto in half. Keywords, would have. Kisame did not know of the danger sense Naruto possessed, nor of the slower perception it granted Naruto. The danger sense rang loudly, and the world had slowed down for Naruto as soon as Kisame had taken the steps forward towards him. Naruto had watched in slow motion as Kisame flew towards him. He would have to give credit to the guy, for he was almost as fast as Kakashi with that blade. So it was right in front of Naruto in only seconds. Oh, and neither Itachi nor Kisame knew of the marking Naruto had put on the other end of the corridor as a safety precaution. Kisame shattered part of the wall in front of him with Samehara. He had intended to cut off the legs of the brat so he couldn't run anymore, but to his shock, he wasn't even standing in front of him anymore. Over here, slowpoke. Kisame whirled around to see Naruto nonchalantly leaning against the wall on the opposite end of the corridor. Even Itachi couldn't conceal his surprise as his eyes were wide as well. Kisame's wide eyes reflected his thoughts clearly. How did he move so fast? I didn't even see him moving. Itachi's thoughts were a bit more sophisticated than his partner's. While it was a bit much to cut off Naruto's legs, it would certainly make their job easy. He had thought that Kisame had gotten Naruto with that strike, but he had dodged it. Not only that, but it looked like he barely put any effort into it. Even with his Sharingan, he hadn't been able to track Naruto's movement, and that was speaking something since his Sharingan was of the highest evolution. That was the speed Naruto had so nonchalantly pulled off. All he had seen was a tiny, almost unnoticeable flash of neon blue. It was almost like he had teleported. Itachi's train of thought was brought to a sudden stop. Surely not. He couldn't have mastered that jutsu. There's no way. Kisame slowly walked back to where Itachi was standing. His face cleared of the shock from earlier. He could see from the look on Itachi's face that even he hadn't seen the boy move. He slowly grinned in excitement. This might be a challenge after all. It's been a long time. Sasuke. Naruto may acted playful on the outside, but inside he was all serious. That sword. He had felt as if it wasn't just taking his life. There was some sort of pull on that sword, but Naruto had flashed away before it could make contact. Seemingly, it could take chalk off his opponents. Also, Jiraiya should have reached here by now. He had caused 2 explosions, enough for Jiraiya to come here as fast as he could. He had activated his sensing, and he was sensing Jiraiya closing in fast. However, he sensed another person that caused a pit to form in his stomach. Why the hell was he there? It's been a long time. Sasuke. Naruto watched with narrowed eyes and a small hint of annoyance as he noticed Sasuke standing behind the 2 missing nin. Kisame turned around to glance at the newcomer as well. Who? Sasuke represented the classic picture of a guy wanting revenge. From straight legs spread slightly apart, hands at the side, and hair shadowing the front of his face. When he glanced up, Naruto could see it. The Sharingan was blazing and burning hate in his eyes was unmistakable. Uchiha Itachi. Sasuke was trembling in rage as he gazed at his older brother. When he had found out that his brother was in the village, courtesy of a loose-lipped Jonin looking for Naruto of all people, his blood had nearly turned to ice. He knew Naruto was strong, very strong for his age. Strong enough that he had been promoted straight to Jonin, but his brother was in another league entirely. No matter how powerful Naruto was, Itachi would utterly destroy him. He had immediately set off in pursuit of his teammate. It was fortunate that the old man at Ichiraku was kind enough to tell him that Naruto had left the village with Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, and one of the legendary Sannin. That popped a question in Sasuke's head as to just what was Naruto doing traveling with one of the most powerful shinobi in the world. Nevertheless, he had ruthlessly pushed the question at the back of his head. Concern for his teammate had overridden his logic, not to mention the rage smoldering inside him at the piece of news that Itachi came for Naruto and not him. he had immediately run off to the closest town, counting on the fact that they could not have gotten far if they had only set off 2 hours earlier. It had taken him only half an hour of running close to full speed to arrive at the town, and he had then stopped for a quick breather for 5 minutes before resuming his search for Jiraiya and Naruto. After 15 minutes, he was ready to pull his hair out when he suddenly a loud explosion sounded not far away from where he was. He had turned to see one of the inn's upper floors exploding outwards. It had been fleeting, but he was able to catch the distinct red lightning that Naruto used. He had immediately rushed over there. He wasn't disappointed at the sight that met his eyes. Naruto was certainly there, confidently leaning against the wall and facing 2 people whose backs were facing him. One was a ridiculously tall man, holding a large bandaged sword that reminded Sasuke of Zabuza's sword. The other one, though. "It has been a long time, Sasuke." Sasuke's blood boiled at the painfully familiar voice. The same voice that he had loved hearing, and the same voice that he had advised him to hate him to gain power to kill him one day. That same voice that slaughtered his parents, his entire clan without an ounce of mercy. Uchiha Itachi. His vision went red as his rage started to cloud his mind. This was the day he had been waiting for so long. The day he would finally kill Itachi and avenge his clan. Naruto could see that rage was beginning to cloud Sasuke, as any and all sense of rationality seemed to leave him as soon as he caught sight of Itachi. He frowned. There was no way Sasuke was ready to take on Itachi, a S-class missing nin at his current power. Even Naruto knew that he would only last 1 or 2 minutes, after which the ex-Anbu captain would finishing him off, flying Thunder God or not. "Sasuke, control yourself. You can't beat him." Even Naruto knew that it was the wrong thing to say, but frankly, he had nothing else to say that could stop Sasuke at this point. He could only hope Sasuke would regain some sort of his rationality. "Stay out of this, Naruto." Okay, maybe not. He watched with wide eyes at what happened next. Sasuke screamed in utter fury rage, unlike anything Naruto had ever seen before. It was as if Sasuke was screaming his soul out, willing that Itachi burst into flames on the very spot. He watched in befuddlement as Sasuke burst in a sprint towards Itachi, and the latter completely lack of caring that his brother was running at him with lightning aimed at his heart. Naruto slowly fell into a loose stance as Itachi just grabbed Sasuke, wrist seemingly without even trying, and redirected Chidori's powers toward the side, causing the third explosion in the hallway. Sasuke struggled to get out of Itachi's hold as the power of his jutsu died out. Naruto weighed his options. He couldn't use a jutsu, for there was a very low chance that he wouldn't hit Sasuke. Oh well, no one ever said everything could be solved with jutsu. 8 shuriken went sailing across the air, approaching the enemy with deadly accuracy. Kisame just snorted and used his large sword to simply bat the shuriken away. Itachi glanced at Naruto for the attack, and Sasuke took his chance to once more attack his brother. "Why You're annoying." The statement was said so dismissively that Naruto felt that Itachi was simply dealing with an annoying housefly, not a person hell-bent on killing him. Also, following the statement was the clean snapping sound of Sasuke's wrist breaking. Naruto sighed in annoyance as Sasuke screamed in pain and bent over, clutching his broken wrist. This really might set back all the progress he had made with the Lord of Emo. Kisame suddenly ran forward, intended to land another strike on Naruto. Naruto brought his kunai up, ready to dodge or block. Before he could do either of them, smoke burst in front of him as a toad appeared, blocking the sword with a 4-limb guard. Naruto did not drop his guard as he spoke to his savior. "You sure took your sweet time coming here, sensei." Jiraiya arrived at the scene from the window on Naruto's end of the corridor. One leg propped up on the sill while the other was flat on the ground, carrying the body of an unconscious woman, the same woman that Naruto had seen earlier. He muttered in annoyance, "You couldn't have left her in the room or something?" Jiraiya clearly heard this, but ignored it as he set the girl down and walked up to stand beside Naruto. "Don't be like that, Naruto. My timing was perfect." Turning to the 2 missing nin, he pointed his finger at them. "Nice try, but a distraction like that could never work on me." It did though, didn't it? Naruto whispered to the older man, only to receive a harsh nudge to his ribs. He wisely backed off, opting to let Jiraiya handle this. However, he was surprised when Jiraiya was about to engage the two. Sasuke got up and snarled, "Itachi is mine!" He shot forwards to try and catch his brother off guard. See, man, get you a girl like Sasuke, bro. No. Okay. Of course, like the time before that, his butt was handed right back to him. Naruto watched with an impassive face as Sasuke was abused like nobody's business, with Itachi not holding back on him at all. Kisame saw this and grinned. I was gonna make an abusive boyfriend joke, but I'm not trying to get kicked off again. You don't seem to be too concerned about your teammate, Naruto-san. Naruto had to bite back the instinctual response of that it was Sasuke's own stupidity that he was being beaten by, like that. Did he really think he was as strong as a Sannin, who were amongst the only few people in the world who could match Itachi? Instead, he replied, "Oh, I'm concerned, alright. It's just that I don't wear my heart on my sleeve like that impulsive moron." Sasuke grunted his pain as Itachi ruthlessly punished him. He could feel that his ribs were at least cracked, if not broken. His stomach felt like it was being crushed with each strike to it, and he was starting to see 3 Itachis. He couldn't even cry out in pain as Itachi held him up against the wall by his throat. I know way too many people that would enjoy that. What is this difference? The gap between us is as large as ever. What have I been doing all this while? Foolish little brother. Itachi's voice might have been monotone and uncaring, but there was no mistaking that he scorned Sasuke in that moment. You still don't have enough hate. You're pathetically weak. Perhaps you need something to refresh your purpose in life. Naruto watched with considerable amount of concern as Sasuke suddenly started screaming like there was no tomorrow. Kisame only chuckled without any sort of mercy. As cruel as always. It seems he used Tsukiyomi on his little brother. Naruto was just watching, about to act, when he suddenly, Jiraiya raced through a series of hand signs beside him, slamming his hands onto the ground. Naruto watched in wonder as the entire hallway transformed. No, got covered in some sort of fleshy substance. He watched as the flesh wrapped around Kisame's feet, causing the giant man to curse. Jiraiya smirked. Kamakichi, Shibari. You two will make good for the giant fire-breathing rock frog. As he said it, fleshly tendrils erupted from the flesh and moved towards the cloaked nin to ensnare them. Naruto whistled in appreciation at the offensive and defensive power of the technique. It was not only capable of attacking whatever was inside it, but protecting as well, evident from the way Sasuke was swallowed behind a wall of flesh. Neither of them saw Itachi close his eyes, but both of them felt the explosion that rocked the hallway. The 4th one today. Naruto absently noted as he ran into the corner with Jiraiya, eyes going wide in surprise. Jiraiya cursed in shock. Somehow they were able to burn a hole through the organ of a frog that breathes fire, he realized. Fascinating, Naruto muttered as he observed the black flames, keeping a safe distance. He had never seen black flames before in his life. As far as he knew, white flames were the hottest, followed by the blue one and the yellow flame. Another interesting thing he observed was that unlike regular fire, this one kept on burning without showing any sign of getting extinguished. He suddenly remembered that he had a teammate who was attacked by an S-rank missing nin. He turned and headed to the spot where Sasuke was buried in the guts. Stop. Stay monetized. Leaving Jiraiya to seal the flames in a scroll. After sealing the black fire, he cancelled the frogmouth jutsu with a heaving sigh. He returned to where Naruto was sitting before the Uchiha, seemingly examining him. The aforementioned Uchiha was pale, giving an absent look to the wall in front of him. It was as if he was asleep and conscious at the same time. Whoa, he really didn't hold back on you at all, it seems. Naruto muttered in slight concern as his hands lightly brushed over Sasuke's chest area. The flinch told him all he needed to know. He lifted Sasuke's shirt, observing the impressive bruises forming on the boy's stomach and ribs. If what he heard was correct. Take small breaths. You don't want to aggravate your possibly broken ribs, Naruto advised them as he closely observed the pupils in Sasuke's eyes. With a sigh, he stood up. Okay, this is how it... He was suddenly cut off when a kunai blazed past them, lodging itself onto the wall. He watched in amusement as Jiraiya's face met a blue ninja sandal. The falling body screamed out, "Dynamic entry!" Jiraiya flew with the kick, crashing into the opposite wall of the wet... I should really stop recording when I'm sick. Okay. Jiraiya flew with the kick, crashing into the opposite wall, all the way down the hallway. Naruto shook his head with a resigned look. Wasn't he the one who preached how a shinobi should always mind his surroundings? Damn it, guy, what's wrong with you? Jiraiya growled out, rubbing his face to try and take away the sting. Guy wilted a little, bowing apologetically to Jiraiya. My apologies, Jiraiya-sama, Guy shouted. Naruto reflected absently that all the man ever did was shout. I had come to retrieve Sasuke-kun, but it seems I mistook you for an enemy ninja. Here he looked sheepish, rubbing the back of his head and sweating slightly under Jiraiya's glare. Whatever, you came here to take the Uchiha, right? Get the kid and go already. He needs to get that wrist looked at, Jiraiya said with a wave of his hand. Not just the wrist, Naruto said as he stood up. He needs immediate medical attention for his cracked, possibly broken ribs, bruised stomach with possibly internal bleeding, psychological damage, and first-degree concussion, in addition to the broken wrist. The last part was said while glaring at Jiraiya. Jiraiya looked incredulously at Naruto along with Guy. How can you possibly know about all of that? Naruto sighed and gave a look of boredom. It's really not that hard. If you paid close attention to the beating he was getting, you would see it too. The broken wrist is obvious. The heavy bruise around his stomach area usually account for internal bleeding, but you can never be sure until proper examination. The cracked ribs are also obvious. I heard it. Don't know about them being broken though. Psychological damage is from the eye technique that Itachi seemingly used on Sasuke, for he suddenly started screaming, followed by transition into a semi-conscious state. The conclusion is also obvious as well, for if you take a look at his pupils, one pupil is dilated a bit more than the other. Jiraiya and Guy gaped at the thorough diagnosis. While not a level of medicine, Naruto's diagnosis was quite logical, now that Jiraiya thought about it. The way that Naruto said everything was obvious told a lot about the way Naruto was used to looking at life. Logical conclusions derived purely from observation. That kid was pretty damn good. He would make a pretty good spy master, if not for his dream of being the Hokage. I think I should see to it that Sasuke can receive medical attention as soon as possible, Guy said as he tenderly picked up Sasuke. Moments like these, geniuses spouting off something, made him feel a bit awkward and inadequate. He then raced off, shouting off, "Springtime!" and "Youth!" Naruto and Jiraiya sweat dropped at the man's excessive behaviors before shrugging it off. Every ninja had their quirks. Guy was just a bit more unique than the others. So, you know why those guys were after me? Not you, more like what's inside of you, Jiraiya answered. Naruto put a hand on his stomach. Where Kurama's seal was? Why? At this point, I don't know. All that matters is anyone who wants the power of the Biju that isn't a Jinchuriki isn't up to any good, Jiraiya explained, sighing heavily. Looks like we all have to be careful around those guys, don't we, Kurama? Indeed. We can never be careful, even if your seal is one of the strongest in existence, Kurama replied. Naruto patted his stomach. I doubt anyone has the key to open this seal. Turning to Jiraiya, he said, "We should leave, don't you think?" A nod and they both gathered their belongings, after which Jiraiya shunted them right outside the town. They resumed their walking in silence, each thinking about what happened back there. And that's where I'm going to end it, guys. I hope you've all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next part. Roll the outro.
Wanted a bitch who was on the move, but you want a goddamn late. Got that one in my bed and she just wanna sleep. Fucking up all of the sheets. She only wake up to eat. do this shit every week. Like, why you do that? Crying, you wanna be great, but sleeping until the next day. Why you do that? Don't got that much in the bank. We go out, she